The leather-bound journal had sat untouched on Marcus Townsend's desk for 3 years, gathering dust like his grief, heavy, pervasive, impossible to shake. His late wife Rebecca had loved that book, carried it everywhere during her final months, scribbling notes between chemotherapy appointments and sleepless nights. Marcus couldn't bear to open it. Until today, it was the anniversary of her death, and something, call it courage or desperation, finally made him reach for it. The pages smelled of her lavender perfume, faint but unmistakable. Her handwriting danced across the yellowed paper. Diary entries about garden plans and grocery lists, sketches of flowers she'd never plant. Then, tucked between 2 pages near the back, a sealed envelope fell onto his lap. His name was written on the front in her trembling hand, followed by words that made his breath catch. "Open this when you're ready to live again." Marcus Townsend was not ready, but his fingers betrayed him, tearing open the seal. Inside was a letter and an address: 847 Parkwood Avenue, Apartment 3B, a neighborhood he'd never heard of in a part of the city his Mercedes had never ventured. Rebecca's words were simple but piercing. "My darling Marcus, if you're reading this, I've been gone too long, and you've forgotten what we promised each other, to always choose kindness, even when it costs us everything. There's someone at this address who needs you, someone I never got the chance to help. Go to her. Tell her I sent you. Tell her the debt is paid. All my love always." Rebecca. Marcus read the letter 4 times, his hands shaking. What debt? Who was this person? Rebecca had managed their charitable foundation, met hundreds of people through her volunteer work. She'd never mentioned anyone specifically, never left instructions like this. The mystery gnawed at him through a sleepless night, through his morning coffee, through the board meeting he barely heard. By noon, he'd made a decision that would have terrified the old. Marcus, the one who existed before grief, hollowed him out. He drove himself, no driver, no assistant, just him and the GPS, leading him through increasingly unfamiliar streets. The skyscrapers of downtown gave way to strip malls, then to neighborhoods, where laundry hung from balconies and children played on cracked sidewalks. Parkwood Avenue was a tired-looking building with peeling paint and a broken intercom. Marcus climbed 3 flights of stairs, his $1,000 shoes echoing on concrete steps, until he stood before Apartment 3B. The woman who answered his knock was younger than he expected, maybe early 30s, with exhausted eyes and flour dusting her worn jeans. A toddler clung to her leg, thumb in mouth, staring at this strange man in an expensive suit behind them. Marcus glimpsed a tiny apartment kept immaculately clean despite its obvious poverty, second-hand furniture, but not a dish out of place. The smell of baking bread wafted through the doorway. "Can I help you?" Her voice was cautious, protective. "I'm looking for—" Marcus realized he didn't even know her name. He pulled out Rebecca's letter with trembling hands. "My wife wrote me this address. She passed away 3 years ago. Her name was Rebecca Townsend." The woman's face transformed. The caution melted into something Marcus couldn't quite read. Shock, perhaps, or recognition or grief of her own. She pressed a hand to her mouth. "Oh my God, Mrs. Townsend, she told me she'd take care of it. But then I saw her obituary and I thought—" Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I'm sorry, I'm Sarah Mitchell. Please come in." The story Sarah told, sitting at her small kitchen table, while her daughter played with blocks on the floor, broke something open in Marcus's chest. 3 years ago, Sarah had been a nurse at the hospital where Rebecca received treatment. A good nurse, dedicated, the kind who stayed late and remembered patients' names. She'd been assigned to Rebecca's floor, had brought her extra blankets, and held her hand during the worst moments. They'd talked, really talked, about life and fear and hope. Sarah had been 8 months pregnant then, with an unfaithful husband who'd emptied their bank account and disappeared, working double shifts to save for the baby, exhausted and scared but determined. Rebecca had noticed. Of course she had. Rebecca always noticed people's pain. She asked about my plans, Sarah said, her voice soft with memory. I told her I'd saved almost enough for the first month's rent on a better apartment, in a neighborhood with good schools, somewhere safe for my baby. She glanced at the window, where iron bars crossed the glass. This was supposed to be temporary. The day before Rebecca's final hospitalization, she'd called Sarah into her room, pressed an envelope into her hands with $20,000 in cashiers. Checks, first and last month's rent, a security deposit, furniture, everything Sarah needed for a fresh start. "Pay it forward someday," Rebecca had said. "When you can. There's no rush." But then Rebecca's condition had deteriorated rapidly. Sarah, 7 months into her pregnancy complications, had been rushed into emergency surgery the same week. When she recovered, Rebecca was gone. And Sarah, drowning in medical debt from her daughter's traumatic birth, massive student loans, and the ongoing costs of single parenthood, had used the money not for a new apartment but for survival, medical bills, formula, rent on this place. It had stretched for a while, but not forever. "I never got to thank her," Sarah whispered. "I never got to tell her that she saved us." That month was the difference between keeping Emma and losing everything. "I've been trying to save again, to honor what she did. But—" She gestured helplessly at the apartment, at the life she was barely holding together with overtime shifts and determination. Marcus sat very still, processing. This was so perfectly Rebecca. Grand gestures of kindness to people others overlooked, done quietly, expecting nothing back. He'd loved that about her. But he'd also let it die with her, hadn't he? The foundation still ran, still wrote checks to worthy causes. But Marcus had stopped seeing the people behind the paperwork. He'd stopped choosing kindness when it cost him something. "What do you need?" The question emerged before he'd fully thought it through. Sarah shook her head. "I'm not asking for anything, Mr. Townsend. I just wanted you to know your wife was an angel, that she mattered." "I know she mattered," Marcus's voice cracked. "I know, but she sent me here for a reason. So I'm asking, what do you need?" The conversation that followed changed everything. Sarah didn't want a handout. She wanted a chance. She'd been applying for nursing positions at better hospitals, but couldn't afford the child care required for interview days. She'd been taking online courses to advance her credentials, but had to drop them when her laptop died. She dreamed of eventually buying a small house, somewhere Emma could have a yard, but the medical debt made qualifying for a mortgage impossible. Marcus listened, really listened, for the first time in 3 years. And he remembered Rebecca's voice. "Kindness isn't just giving money, Marcus. It's giving someone the tools to build their own future." The next week, Marcus did something unprecedented for a CEO of his stature. He called Sarah and offered her a job, not charity, but a real position, as the head nurse for the expanded medical center his company was funding. Better pay, full benefits, childcare stipend. He arranged for a debt consolidation service to restructure her medical bills. He introduced her to a financial planner who helped her start saving properly. But more than that, he started showing up, not as the CEO, but as Marcus. He brought coffee on Sarah's rough days. He taught Emma to play chess when he visited. He listened to Sarah's nursing stories and found himself actually laughing for the first time since Rebecca died. He remembered what it felt like to connect with another human being beyond boardroom, strategies, and quarterly reports. 6 months later, Sarah signed the papers on a modest house with a small yard. Marcus was there holding Emma, who'd started calling him Mr. Marcus, with delighted giggles. Sarah turned to him with tears streaming down her face. "Your wife saved my life. But you gave me back my future. Why?" Marcus thought of Rebecca's letter, of the promise they'd made to each other decades ago when they were young and idealistic, and believed love could change the world. He thought of how he'd let grief turn him into a ghost, going through motions but not really living. He thought of this brave young woman who'd faced impossible odds with grace, and her daughter who reminded him that hope still existed. "Because Rebecca was right," he said simply. "Kindness costs us everything, and it's worth it." The leather journal sat on his desk still, but now beside it was a photo. Sarah, Emma, and Marcus at the housewarming party, all of them grinning like family. Rebecca smiled from the frame next to it, and Marcus could almost hear her whisper, "Now you're ready, my love. Now you're living again."